Hello everyone, welcome back to a new video. I hope you had a great day. Let's take a look at some new malicious compliance stories, where people conform to the letter, but not the spirit of a request. Thank you for subscribing to the channel and for hitting the like button. Today we have 5 great stories. If you enjoy them, please subscribe and hit the like button. And now let's begin, shall we? The first story is called Take Lunch When the Bell Rings. So, a few years back, I worked in a lab in a small employee-owned metal plating shop. Now this was my first time in an employee-owned shop, and I was not prepared for the pettiness that I had to endure for 6 months before I quit and found a better position. A little background for those of you who have no experience in a lab. When running samples, time just goes by. Some samples take 10 minutes, and others take upwards of an hour. Now this shop had very strict hours for break and lunch. There was even a bell like a damn school. Anyway, I was not restricted to these bells because, like I said, sample time varies. And my role was to make sure manufacturing doesn't stop because of issues. I was the only qualified chemist on site of about 100 people. I also overhauled the entire quality system to pass audits, but lunch is what they focus on. So onto the story. One day, manufacturing was just bad. I'm one person testing 6 tanks because the solution wasn't plating. From 5 AM to 3 PM I was troubleshooting by myself because, like I said, I'm the only chemist. So I didn't eat lunch. Anyway, at around 3:30 PM things quiet down and I eat my first meal of the day. Then suddenly, out of the corner of my eye, I see someone taking my picture. Of course, I get an earful from management saying I have to take lunch when the bell rings. Onto the malicious compliance. Anytime I got a sample in around 10 to 11 AM, I strictly measured the time it would have taken me to finish that test. I would also do it very slowly and carefully. If I got a sample in at 11:30 AM, I would tell my boss, sorry, this takes me an hour to do and lunch is in 30 minutes. I'll do it after my lunch break. After a few days of this, manufacturing became really bad. I just waited until after lunch. Guess who got permission to eat lunch whenever I wanted? I quit soon after, with a job that paid 10k more a year with full benefits and a newly renovated lab. The next story is called Thousands of Dollars Turned to Stone. I don't get yelled at work. Most people don't yell at someone with my body size and composition. Today we had trucks drop off some concrete and non-treated lumber for the building materials department. I work in this department. Both of these categories of products cannot get wet. If they do, they cannot be sold or must be sold at a reduced price. The bundles of wood and pallets of concrete are unloaded shortly before I get to work and clock in the afternoon to work a closing shift. So I arrive and all this product is outside. This is normal. I check the weather and have about 3 hours until rain is forecast. Okay, it will be close, but I can get it done in the time frame. So I begin. I bring inside a few pallets while also helping customers. We are mildly understaffed today. Well, Mr. Manager says the pallets cannot be inside because they block the aisles. This is the issue, we don't have enough employees in my department to work product and help customers. He is correct about policy, saying not to block the aisles, but we do this all the time so we can work together on products and help customers. Doing both is part of the job. I wanted a clear answer. My associates and I all wanted a clear answer. So 30 minutes into me working, it begins to absolutely downpour with crazy lightning. About 2 hours before it was forecast in the weather. So instead of all the product being inside, it was outside, so it would not block any aisles. I normally would not let this happen and just bring it inside and take getting chewed out. But today I figured, if I was going to get chewed out, I was going to get chewed out for following the rules. So the product is outside and it's raining sideways. The manager is not happy. The forklift is also outside and covered in rain, only because he doesn't like it being inside. Half of the lumber and concrete is already toast. He then asked why it was all outside in the rain. I reminded him about what he told me and also reminded him about the operating procedures. At this point, 50% of the concrete bags are saturated and begin to harden into just big rocks, and the other stuff is blistering and falling apart. So he gets to explain why the store had a couple of thousands in markdown today to his boss. His boss likes me, so I doubt any of this will even come back to bite me. Feels good. The third story is called You Want Email Notifications? I work as an integrated circuit design engineer. My team is mostly based in the Bay Area, but for some reason my current project is being headed up on the East Coast. We haven't met the project manager in person, working remote, and it turns out he's a bit more controlling and overbearing than we are used to. Now, chip design isn't the same as software development, but it has some similarities. We use our version control system to check in changes to the design to make sure we can roll back if there are errors or whatever. Works great. In order to keep the database manageable, we typically don't check in too often. Only when we make a significant change, we want others to be able to see. So we would do a few check-ins on average normally. Anyway, this new project manager came down with an edict last month that one of our KPIs will be how many check-ins we do. Predictably, people have started checking in new versions of their designs for every little thing they do. It is becoming harder and harder to comprehend how the project is going, as the history is all muddled now. The project manager has configured the version control system so he gets an email for every check-in so he can keep tabs on us. During my last one-on-one a few days ago with the project manager, I told him the team didn't want to be evaluated on check-ins anymore, because doing too many check-ins is counterproductive, but the guy wouldn't budge. We are getting to the point in the project where we have to start hammering the design with tests to try to find faults. We do this by generating many thousands of files that have test sequences in them. These are called test vectors. Then we run a program that sends our design random sampling of these test vectors. Anyway, for traceability, we check these test vector files in the version control system. So this morning I was on Slack with a few team members and we came up with an idea. We usually make a zip file of the test vectors to check in once. But there's a performance argument we can make to just check them in individually as raw text. So cue the malicious compliance. The project manager wants an email from every check-in? Fine. The project manager wants to evaluate us on the number of check-ins? Fine. We wrote a script that makes each team member check in a certain amount of test vectors, tens of thousands for each of us. This will nuke both his KPI results and kill his inbox. Could happen to a nicer bloke. He just called my cell. He was surprisingly good-natured about it. He just basically said he got the point, and that was pretty clever. Then he asked for some more project-related stuff. Sorry that the outcome didn't have more fireworks, but I don't think we'll be doing tons of check-ins anymore. Victory. The next story is called Follow the Flag Code. This happened about 10 years ago. I was struggling to figure out where my life was headed, what I wanted to do for a career, typically existential crisis stuff. I quit my job in the auto industry to fill out a few other career paths. I landed on security guard for an industrial complex in Middle Georgia, a big company in a small town. The pay was great, it was the night shift, so it worked well with my non-existent sleep schedule. And it was an interesting change from what I've done most of my life. I loved it at first, until my boss changed his shift to overlap with mine in the morning. The dude was nuts. He had delusions of grandeur. He was a pathological liar. Frequently made up stories about being in the Navy SEALs with Steven Seagal. He was a quartermaster in the Navy for 4 years before he filed a disability claim after he knocked over a storage bag and it fell on him. One of his biggest pet peeves was the massive flag the company had. He printed out a few dozen copies of the flag code and told us to follow it to the letter, including putting it up and down every morning and night. Being night shift, I was almost always the person putting it up. One morning there was extremely bad weather and, per the flag code, I didn't put the flag up. My boss came in about an hour later and ran his first rounds and noticed the flag wasn't displayed. I pointed at the specific section of the flag code that says not to display it during inclement weather and he absolutely lost his mind. Berated me for 30 minutes. When it was time to clock out, he was still berating me, but I just stood up, clocked out and left our little check. The next day I show up and he tells me I'm suspended. Cool, I get a free night off. I come back 2 days later and the district manager is there with my boss. We sit down and chat. My boss keeps interrupting me and insulting me, so I told the district manager that I'm leaving if my boss doesn't let me speak. The district manager takes me elsewhere to finish the conversation. I explained everything that happened, showed him the flag code, showed him the weather that morning and told him about my boss threatening to fire me if I didn't follow the flag code and then berating me for 30 minutes for following the flag code. The district manager and I walk into the security shack and sit down with my boss. The district manager proceeded to tell my boss that he's being fired for harassment and for violating his own flag code policy. I ultimately left a week later because I found a better job elsewhere, but it was one of the most satisfying things I've ever experienced. The last story is called Check the Legality. About 10 years ago, I had my first real job working in a fast food chain for minimum wage. It was a bad job, but it was only to fill a gap between me dropping out of 6th form in February and starting my college course in September. After being there several months, the regional manager came over to visit. He told us there were a few incidents regarding money missing from the tills that were never resolved. We are not exactly talking about the heist of the century here. It would be a few pence or at most £5 out, and this had only happened on a handful of occasions. Most were resolved to being mistaken orders on the tills or card receipts dropping behind the tills. But because of this, there was a new policy that they implemented, where the staff members would each be personally responsible for their tills. This means they required everybody to come in 15 minutes before their shift and stay 15 minutes after their shift to count the money in the tills. All of this time was unpaid. We were also told if the tills were short, we had to pay it back out of our own pockets on the same day. No exceptions. Of course, if the tills were up, they'd just call that a win for them and pocket the extra cash. The staff always lose. Naturally, everybody was mad about this, except for one brown nose who said it was great that people have to take responsibility for their mistakes. I guess unpaid overtime will teach us a lesson, right? I'm usually very quiet and introverted, but I will absolutely speak out for something I truly believe in, or protest against something I don't. I was first to speak out against these new policies and question their legalities. To this, the area manager responded with something along the lines of, "Feel free to check their legality. I assure you that we aren't breaking any laws." So I did exactly that. Later that night, I went home and checked our laws, and unsurprisingly, everything they were enforcing was illegal here. The area manager is based in Ireland, which more than likely has different employment laws, but his ignorance of our different laws and situation was painfully obvious. I called up the equivalent of a union. They don't exist here either, and they confirmed that it was illegal and advised me not to adhere to the policies. The next shift comes around and I roll in at 11 AM, my start time. Immediately, the other staff starts kicking off. I went upstairs, counted my float in the 15 minutes they expected it to take, and then actually started working at 11:15. I explained myself to the rest of the staff and showed them evidence, and they all decided to follow suit. Everybody except for the brown nose. She insisted that we all needed to do our part for the company, that pays us minimum wage, don't forget, and that we should be grateful for the jobs. Still minimum wage. None of us took that on board and left her to carry on working for free if that's her choice. I think she was expecting something from the boss for her dedication. The local manager was also on our side, but he did have to tell the regional manager what was happening. On the regional manager's next visit, about a month later, he started having meetings with the staff to investigate what this was all about and why we weren't sticking to the policy. They all pointed towards me, telling them not to. When he got round to the meeting with me, he was mad and started kicking off at me and asking why I was so determined to overrule him. I replied, "You told me to check the legalities of the policies, so I did, and showed him the evidence in the form of our local employment laws on my phone." Defeated, he left and decided to withdraw all the policies, including the ones where we had to waste time counting the floats and pay back any charges. The rest of the staff there liked me for it, except for Brown Nose, but nobody liked her anyway. And now it's your time to shine. Let me know what you think about the stories. On a scale of 1 to 10, how would you rate the stories? I hope you enjoyed today's video, and I hope you have a great day. Stay safe. Bye bye.